Hi everybody, it's Nathaniel here from the Cider Link, and this is an interview with Mark from Lost Pippin down in Tasmania. And these guys have got a really wide range of cider. It's probably the biggest range that I'm aware of, actually, and some great products in there. And they also use real cider apples, which in my opinion makes for a very nice range of ciders. So enjoy the interview. And I started off by asking Mark to tell us a bit about his background.
Me personally, I've got a background in viticulture. So I've worked in the Tasmanian wine industry prior to starting Lost Pippin for about 10 years, including a master's degree in ripening physiology and Pinot. So my background is very much in cool climate wine growing. After I'd spent some time doing postgraduate study, I worked as a viticulturist for the Domain A Stony Vineyard in the Cider Valley for about 2.5 years, spending time in France, New Zealand, other places, soaking up their wine industry a little bit. So that's my personal background. Didn't set out to become a cider maker, and it kind of ties in with the history of Lost Pippin. Lost Pippin was started in the Huon Valley. It was first mooted at some meetings that we were having. I'd basically been recruited by a not-for-profit organisation in the Huon Valley to develop the Old Grove Research Station for tourism. The Grove Research Station is famous for its heritage apple collection, and the idea was that I'd go down there and develop it as a commercial retail nursery based around heritage apple trees and various other apple-like activities, given the history of the region and in particular the history of that research station. It had basically been Australia's apple research station for the last 60 years. So it had a rich history, and the idea was that obviously we'd open up for tourism. The budget that was supposed to be there never quite originated. So we were looking through things to do. It became pretty clear that just a retail nursery by itself wouldn't work. Coincidentally, I was working, so the retail nursery was to be attached to Tahoon Fields, which is a major wholesale apple tree nursery that sells apple trees all over Australia. And at that point, I was travelling around Australia selling a lot of cider varieties, traditional cider varieties, English, French cider varieties that came out of that Grove apple collection or the heritage collection. And we were selling those for orchardists all around the country that were basically getting into cider. So we sold trees from Orange all the way across to Western Australia. So I was spending a lot of time doing that. And we worked out, with my history in the wine industry and a bit of a background there, some amazing facilities down there, and the fact that we were watching, 5 hectares of apple orchards drop their fruit on the ground every year without a home for them, and the genetics of the material, or the genetic material we had down there in the cider varieties, it just made sense that we look into cider. So Lost Pippin was born. After we first launched, we made the decision, as Lost Pippin now, to buy the business off the previous owners and to move it to the Cider Valley and into a winery, where we've been ever since. So we're now at the point where we've moved out of that winery and we're developing our own facility at Campania on a property called Cranston, because we've basically outgrown that facility. So.
That's great. So it's been a real evolution then, really.
Yeah, it's been a massive evolution. I never set out to become a cider maker. I really fell into it. And I never set out to actually buy the business either, but we launched the brand and I was made redundant and they were looking to sell the brand. So we basically just stepped in, at the right time, picked up the brand in its infancy, because we saw it as having massive potential, and we've taken it from there. So we've got really good distribution in the southern half of Tasmania anyway, and a pretty large local following. and we do have a limited exposure in Melbourne, and we get wholesale inquiries from other parts of Australia, but we're looking after our own backyard a little bit at the moment.
Mm. Can you tell us a bit about what you're doing that's different when it comes to cider making?
Well, I guess from my point of view, we're looking. I mean, we've released a range of different special releases around heritage cider apples, and we will be increasingly focusing on traditional cider varieties in the future, because we think they hold the key to really high-end, top-notch cider. Mm. And that's one thing that we do very differently. We also have a philosophy that we make cider from apples and perry from pears, and that's cider ends with apples and perry ends with pears, and we don't mix in any other fruits, flavourings or colouring. So no concentrates, no waters, just 100% Tasmanian fruit, and the best possible flavour, from those natural flavour sources that we can have. So, i.e. being the apple, but also the fermentation process and, both aging and secondary fermentation is necessary. Mm. So, I guess that's what makes us a little bit different. And the fact that we are 100% Tasmanian, both ownership and fruit, we're family owned. We do it all ourselves, unlike a lot of others that use contract makers. Mm. And it kind of puts us out there by ourselves. We also have really close relationships with our apple growers, and we like to pay our apple growers a little bit more than the market rate. It works for us in that we get fruit security, but it also gives them a fair price for what would otherwise be a waste fruit resource, and which enables us to deliver a decent product at an appropriate price point. Mm.
Yeah, that's really good. It's a wider benefit to the community. Which
is
great.
Well, I mean, we, unlike other people, we're not just in it for ourselves. So we have really strong relationships with our growers, which is really important over time, particularly, when we're doing more traditional ciders and when we want a reliable fruit source. We're less, I guess, exposed to the whims of growers who come and go, and if the market shifts on us rapidly, at least we've got, some runs on the board with our growers as far as, them looking after us first, which is really important from the business point of view. Mm.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's great, and it's really nice to hear that your view on the future of the industry with cider apples becoming more prevalent, which is really good to hear.
Yeah, so we've planted our own orchards, and we have actually made in 2014 we made a batch from some trees I actually sold to another budding cider maker down here in Tassie. So we made our first batch of fruit off that, and we picked up a pretty decent bronze with that at Cider Oz, which was good. Mm. So yeah, we're just into making, commercial stuff, but also really traditional stuff. And the idea is that, there's more than just sweet and fizzy in the marketplace, and we want to, show people what cider really is, not just that, super fruity appley stuff, which we do too. Mm. But we want people to see, depth and complexity and, interest in character and flavour from our fruit, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So that leads me on quite nicely to the next question, and I know you've got a few ciders in the range, so maybe this is a bit simplistic, but my question is, how would you say your ciders are best enjoyed?
Look, to be honest, our cider, because we do have such a large range, the majority of our ciders are, sessionable, pretty easy going, approachable numbers, anywhere from dry to sweet. But we also do a range of ciders that are really good with food, and we also do a few fortified, which are particularly good with food. So, I like to think that our cider could be enjoyed, in a lot of different occasions, from a really special occasion with food, all the way through to just kicking back on a Saturday afternoon and having a session.
Yeah. Something for every occasion.
Yeah, perhaps. So, well, I'd like to say that on a powerboat somewhere, but it's not like that. So we're very much down to earth. Good quality booze and horses for courses. So if you're sitting down and having a session, maybe a wild or a sparkling as you go, or if you're into some food or want to impress people with cider matching with food, then you've got a range of different options there, from some of our special release stuff through to even some of our regular stuff matches really nicely with food.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's one of the evolutions as the market matures. People start to see cider more as a session drink and more to comparable with wine in lots of situations.
Yeah, and that's how I've always seen cider. I guess my attitude towards a lot of alcoholic beverages, and that comes from being, in the wine industry for a period of time, and loving, French and old world styles, is, that idea that alcohol is more than just something that you drink, to get drunk, or something that you drink at a party. It's very much, that it's part of life and part of meals and, part of the enjoyment of food. So, and I think that flows through to cider, the way that people enjoy cider in other parts of the world, be it, crepes or wherever it is, and what they're drinking with cider. I had very much the same philosophy to what we do.
And then my last question was going to be around what does the future hold, but you touched on that a bit earlier in the conversation. So a movement into new premises by the sound of it, and expansion across the board.
Yeah, so we've moved everything. We haven't released a Cranston Perry for about 2 years, but my business partner owns property at Campania, and his property is called Cranston, which hasn't grown apples or pears for about 40 or 50 years, but was at one time an apple and pear growing property, and we've got all of the old stencils and grower numbers and things like that from when they were there, which we discovered the other day, which was pretty cool. But basically a historic property in the Coal River Valley, and we're developing that as our both site for manufacturing, and there could be some things to come down the track there. We've planted orchards there, and around some old apple pickers' huts that exist on the property. And so over the next year, we'll be developing that and expanding the scope of what we do a little bit. And yeah, hopefully expanding our reach into the eastern seaboard and other parts of Australia. We're a small guy, and we probably punch above our weight a fair bit, but we're coming from a low base. We don't have massive commercial backing or anything like that. So we're just two families plugging it out, trying to make a headway in the booze industry. So, and we enjoy it all along the way.
So there you have it. That is Mark from Lost Pippin. And you've probably got a sense of the depth of knowledge and the passion that Mark brings to the cider making. And that really, really comes through in the products. They've got an amazing range, some really delicious products. It's certainly a favourite of ours. And I'd very much encourage you to have a taste and give us some feedback. Let us know what you think. Cheers.